Life Management Science Labs would like to acknowledge that we live and produce this podcast on the traditional lands of the Wurundjeri people. We'd also like to acknowledge the traditional owners of the land of our listeners and our international colleagues. We'd like to thank and pay our respects to the elders, past, present, and emerging. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast produced by LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. We are champions of life management science, providing structured insights informed by science and inspired by practice on key aspects of conscious living. Each week, we bring you scientific and practical insights on each element with the expert knowledge of professionals in the field. I'm your host, Blue Ngo, coming to your ears from Naarm, Melbourne, Australia. Let's learn together. Hello, everyone, and welcome back to Doing Well, the show where we talk about all things well-being. And today, I'm very excited to have Kate with me in this virtual studio, and we're going to talk about understanding our connection with nature. And the reason I'm excited to talk about Kate is because, and by the way, she doesn't go by Kate on paper, but just so you know, in case you want to look for her publications, it's under Kathryn Schertz. And she is a postdoctoral researcher in the Emotion and Self-Control Lab in the Psychology Department of the University of Michigan. And she also completed her Ph.D. in the Environmental Neuroscience Lab at the University of Chicago. And I'll throw over to Kate right now so she can introduce a bit more about herself before we get started, because I love to hear from my guests. So Kate, take it away. Let us know a bit more about yourself, who you are, why you're doing the work that you're doing, and why you would love to talk about the connection that we have with nature today.
Yeah, thank you so much. And thanks for having me. So my research focuses on how interactions with the physical environment influence cognition, emotional processes and behavior, and then the mechanisms for these effects. I got into this research because I hiked the Appalachian Trail, which is a long distance trail in the East Coast of the United States. It took me about 5 months. And I spent a lot of time thinking about how being in nature was influencing me. So when I finished, I started looking for psychologists who were studying that, and found a great lab at the University of Chicago, and have been basically able to research, have been doing research in that area ever since. And that was in 2015. So I'm excited to share more today.
Yeah. And you did tell me a little bit about your work earlier, so I'm keen to hear more about that in our discussion now. Before we go into the part where we talk about all things related to connection with nature, we would love to get to know more about you and get some recommendations from you, if possible. And we start by having a section called Have You Met Kate? So are you ready for that?
Sure.
Let's do it. Okay. The first question, I love asking my guests this question because I'm an avid reader. What is a book you would recommend to our listeners?
Catch-22.
Oh, I haven't read that one actually.
Oh, it's
so late to the
American
party.
Classic. Yeah.
Yeah, I know. It's been on my list for so long, and I was just like, yeah, I'll read that later because it will always be there. But yeah, that's a good one. How about a movie?
My favorite movie is Casablanca.
Yeah. Next one, let's talk about a podcast.
I actually don't listen to my podcast, but I did really enjoy Serial, which is probably one of the more famous ones, but I thought it was a really interesting story. So.
It's called Serial? Is that what it's
Serial?
Oh, wow. Okay.
Yeah, it's
That's a new
crime.
One.
It's a true crime podcast where they're investigating a man who was convicted of murdering his girlfriend. He's actually now been released from prison. Serial, I mean, there's some controversy there, but it drew attention to his case, and his conviction was actually overthrown.
Wow.
Story.
Interesting. Yeah. Actually, a lot of people on our team love true crime podcasts. So, this recommendation will at least definitely be really fun for our team. Next one is, who is your famous role model? Or if not famous, then your personal role model?
Sure. I would say one of my famous role models is Greta Thunberg, the
Yes.
climate activist from Sweden.
Yeah,
She's very inspiring.
Yeah, such an inspiring young person, and just
Absolutely.
changes our perspective on everything. Yeah, I love her. And finally, what is a course that you have completed that you would like to talk about?
Oh, sure. So I got to actually take one really fun class at the University of Chicago where we learned about park design. So it was called Second Nature, and everybody in the class had to develop a new park for the city of Chicago. And so we learned about different aspects of, things people consider when they visit parks. And I was able to design a park based around the psychological principles of restoration that my psychology research uses. And so that was super fun. And the professor put everybody's designs in a book afterwards, and just very cool to see all the sorts of parks that people came up with. So I really enjoyed that.
Oh, wow. Yeah, well, that's super cool. Sounds so practical.
Yeah, I mean, I had no background in art or architecture or landscape design or anything, so I don't know how practical my theoretical part was, but it was certainly fun to try and enact the principles. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it sounds interesting because even if it's not entirely your expertise actually played a big part in making it happen. So I feel like it could be like a collaboration effort, but
yeah, absolutely.
That sounds so cool. Yeah, I love that. I designed a park. That's so cool. Yeah. All right. So we've got to know you a little bit better. And now let's actually talk about well-being and our connection with nature. I think this topic is probably in this day and age super important to talk about, but not a lot of us, actually spend time thinking about it because, it's like the hustle and bustle, and you just go with the grind of the days and you don't really think about it. And it really affects your well-being when you don't think about it. From my personal opinion, I haven't done any research, but from just noticing things for myself, I see that. So before we go into talking about nature, let's talk about well-being. So to you, what does well-being mean? Because for each person, it means really different things.
Yeah, I would say that for me, a definition of well-being includes feelings like you're thriving or you have satisfaction in a balance of areas in your life. So this includes factors such as physical health, mental health, feeling satisfied with work, satisfied with your relationships with your friends and family, can mean living in a healthy environment, financial security, satisfaction with any sort of spiritual practice you may have, all those things coming together so that you feel like you can, have a satisfying life.
Yeah, it's a myriad of things, right? And
Absolutely.
Yeah, totally agree with you. Yeah, I think on this show, a lot of our experts were kind of talking about 3 key pillars, like physical, mental, and spiritual. But when you mention other aspects as well, I was kind of like, yeah, that's true. Like the financial aspect, like where do we list that? Is it physical? Is it mental? Is it spiritual? Actually, no. It's a completely different thing.
It can certainly help contribute to all 3 of those aspects, right?
Yeah, exactly.
If you're too worried about finances, you end up not having the time or the cognitive resources to think about or feel like you can prioritize any of those other aspects.
Yeah, that's a really good point, because I think when we talk about, let's say, our mental health, right? A lot of people are like, why don't you go to therapy? But then the fact is therapy is expensive, and not everyone can afford it. Obviously in good healthcare systems, you get counseling sessions for free, and, you could get support from these hotlines, but it's not the same as actually going to therapy, every week. So it's kind of like, that's an interesting point. I don't think anyone has raised that on the show. So I think, it's something to think about, because I feel like the current healthcare system is also kind of not designed in a way that supports our basic, which is our mental health. Like, I feel like we're really prioritizing the physical health aspect, which is important, but also there's a whole other aspect out there that we are not really covering. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. And I mean, I guess I don't know how healthcare works in Australia, but in the United States, even basic physical health is expensive, and not everybody has as much access to it.
Yeah.
They need, and certainly not access to therapists or, weekly counseling sessions.
Yeah. Well, I would say here it's probably slightly better. We are covered by Medicare. Obviously, we pay tax for it, but it covers, let's just say, GP sessions. I think now it's actually like getting more expensive to go to GPs, and it's not always fully covered by Medicare, but you still can do that. And then obviously, treatment-wise, you probably have to get insurance for a lot of the other activities. Like, if you want to get an ambulance, you still have to pay for that. But I do know that you can get, I think, 10 counseling sessions in a year. So based on, depending on your condition, you can have that. So I think that's pretty decent. It's a good start.
It's a good start. Yeah, exactly.
It's a really good start. Like if you go, like I say, let's say one session every month and 10 months are covered, basically, if you need help with your mental health. But I don't know in practice because I haven't actually gone to these sessions, but that's what I know so far.
Right.
But there's a really big difference between countries, right? We don't know. And also,
absolutely.
I'm not from Australia. I'm from Vietnam, and there we just don't talk about therapy. So, no counseling sessions. Like if you really want to go therapy, you do that yourself, basically. It's an interesting. It's kind of like this interesting myriad of different things to think about, but that's a really good way to start talking about this conversation because, there will be a lot of things that we talk about later that will be related to it, especially when we talk about the misconceptions when it comes to well-being. So you already touched on a few things that you think would be important to our well-being, but we also like to debunk some myths or just things that people think are important to our well-being, but actually not really. Okay. So, to your observation, based on your work, what do you think to be some of the misconceptions about well-being?
Yeah, I would say one is that well-being means being happy all the time. I don't think that that's true. You don't have to, it's okay to have negative emotions. That's healthy. That's life. Everyone deals with that. So it doesn't mean not feeling these things. It means having, ways to cope, ways to work through those, having a support system, things like that. I would say that's one misconception. Another one, I guess, and I don't know how prevalent this attitude is in other countries, but maybe in the US, having good well-being is sometimes associated with, you have to meditate and do yoga. Like those are the activities that are key. And I just think that, a one size fits all approach isn't the right way to think about it. If you're not into yoga, like that's okay. That doesn't have to be the one activity that you do. There are lots of ways to do it. Some people are into intense exercise and some people are into going on walks, right? Like you can pick and choose the things that work for you. And just because they work for somebody else doesn't mean like, you don't have a good approach to well-being because you're not doing the same things as other people. So that's what I would say as a couple of misconceptions.
Yeah, absolutely. I think one of the things that it's quite important when you mention that is, each person has a very different relationship with how they would like to nurture their well-being, especially, like physical health, mental health. We enjoy different ranges of activities, and that brings us a sense of well-being because it has to do with what we like and what works for us. So today we're talking about the connection we have with nature, regardless of whether you like intense exercise or, you just like to go on a walk or go to yoga. It's important for you to have that connection with nature, right? This is a fact that I know a lot of research papers have mentioned. And obviously it's nothing new to a lot of us, but just so we remind everyone of the importance of it. First of all, what do you think about this connection that we have with nature? What is it? Why is it so important? And how can we go about having that connection?
Yeah. I think that we'll start with how you go about having it. And a lot of research has just shown that if you choosing to engage with nature, can can help build that connection. Taking your kids out into nature, if you have them, can build that from an early age. People with early experiences with nature typically have stronger feelings of connection. But don't, if you miss that, don't worry. Like you can build this connection to nature just by spending time in nature, noticing elements of nature. There's some interesting research showing that it's not necessarily about like the amount of time. It's not like the people who spend the most time in nature get the most benefits, but even just taking the moment to listen to the birds that you hear, or stopping and smelling the flowers, those sorts of activities really do influence mental health and feelings of well-being, being satisfied with life. So don't feel like you have to get a certain amount of time in. But even just noticing the natural elements in your neighborhood, going to local parks, and then you can mix it up. You can go to other, more wild natural areas if you want, when you have more time off. It's, depending on where you live, maybe you have easier access to the ocean or, blue space. We tend to talk about in terms of blue space and green space. But maybe water is available to you. So visiting those natural areas, all those sorts of activities can help build how connected you feel to the world around you. And it can be, like we started talking about, an individual. I like going on hikes. That's not what everybody's into, right? Maybe you like gardening, right? Like that's still engaging. With the natural world, and all of those activities can help build that connection. And research has shown that even just feeling connected to nature, even if you don't get to engage with it as often as you want, can actually, is associated with feeling happier and feeling higher levels of well-being.
Yeah, totally. I mean, that is what the research says, but I can tell you straight away from personal experience that any time that I'm kind of feeling down and I just go for a walk and I go to, let's just say, an open area with lots of trees and plants and flowers, I'm just like, I feel okay. Like I feel grounded,
Yeah.
Even if it's like a really funky day, whatever it is, like after a long walk in nature, I just feel better. So I kind of attest to that for sure.
Yeah, no, I hear it all the time. I mean, we try and do it with large samples, we have stringent experiments where we send people on walks in nature versus walks in city environments. So there's certainly, a research aspect, but then anecdotally, I talk to people all the time who are just like, oh yeah, I just went for a walk in the nearby park and I just felt less anxious right away, and so I definitely think that people will see it in their daily lives, and most people have intuitions that it'll be good for them. But like you said, having the time and getting to act on it in order to build those connections and to reap the benefits is important.
Yeah, absolutely. Wow. I mean, I'm just talking to you and I'm already like imagining myself going for a hike and I'm like, oh, that feels so good. It's been a while since I did one. It's been a while since I did one. And I'm like, oh, now I should do it. We have a long weekend coming here in Australia. So great. I think it will be the perfect chance to go for a hike. Yeah, perfect timing. I love that. And yeah, I think it's also a matter of where you live as well, because I know for a lot of people, and this probably is what hinders them, because for a lot of people, they live in really busy, let's just say city areas where there's nothing but tall buildings, and very rarely would they find a park or, even like a place where there are a lot of trees and plants. So that's one of the reasons that, I feel like it's not being talked about too much. And a lot of people are going to the gym, myself included. But I still find that, like every now and again, I like to switch it up and just like be out in nature. That really helps.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I mean, when you think about things that can hinder connection to nature or, like ability to interact with nature, I think there are some real structural barriers that prevent people from doing so. And a lot of times it's related to socioeconomic status where, people who are in poor neighborhoods have less trees nearby, or they have less parks or less quality parks. They don't feel safe visiting parks. There's research showing that members of minoritized populations and immigrants also feel they have less sense of belonging in public spaces and may not feel like they belong in parks, which can be a barrier to going. And I think that part of the problem is that a lot of policy looks at nature and being able to interact with nature as sort of a luxury. And in our research, we think of it as more of a necessity. It's contributing to mental health, physical health, in all sorts of ways. And we haven't really fully determined the mechanisms for that yet, but we know that these effects are there. And so when you see this as a necessity, then you realize that we need a more equitable approach in allowing everybody to have an easier time accessing parks and places like that.
Yeah, that is so true. And, it's not about just our well-being, but it's also this relationship that we have with nature, right? And that's something that we want to talk about today because I think this actually goes to your famous role model, Greta. So, this topic will be really timely to talk about because on the one hand, we are talking about being in nature, so we improve our overall level of well-being. And on the other hand, we have this relationship with our planet. And a lot of the time, we forget about this connection we have with nature in the sense of, we're one, we're here and, we thrive thanks to nature. So I want to pick your brains because you when you do your research, obviously you've come across a lot of the things that have been happening around the world and, things that we can do better perhaps. And this is related to pro-environmental attitudes. Not everyone has that. For example, I can tell you in Australia, we have, we have a lot of, let's just say, discussion forums or activities or flyers around the city to just, reuse, reduce, recycle. That's the basic, right? Everyone knows about that. Yeah. And you would go out and then you would still see, and this happens to me as well sometimes, where I have a keep cup but I forget to bring it, and then I kind of oh, okay. Most of the time I would choose to have the coffee at the cafe. So then, I don't, get another plastic cup out. But then sometimes I would go out and I forget about the fact that, I should have brought a bag. And then I, get a reusable plastic bag, but I still feel bad about it. And I feel like a big part of it is it's not consciously in my mind all the time. And, I'm as guilty as a lot of other people. I'm not saying that I'm perfect, but I wonder if there's a correlation between how much you're connected to nature versus how pro-environmental you are.
Yeah. Yeah, there has been research showing that correlation. Definitely. So people who report higher connections to nature are more likely to identify as an environmentalist. They're more likely to sign a petition about recycling in their community. They're more likely to report walking or biking instead of driving to places in order to, reduce emissions. And a lot of the research has been correlational, but some reasons behind that might be that people who feel connected to nature or connected to the natural world are then motivated to protect it. They're motivated to do those behaviors that are less damaging to the planet. And conversely, then disconnection from the natural world might mean you're unmotivated. And I think one way to think about this is if you look at how humans interact with other humans, we know that you're more likely to help somebody that you're close to. You're more likely to be willing to do things to help them. And that might then extend to nature as well. If you feel closer to nature, you're more likely to help it, to be willing to engage in those behaviors that are useful. But I do want to say, I think the causal relationship, we need to do more research to determine whether we can, whether increasing somebody's connection to nature then leads to more pro-environmental behaviors, or do people that already engage in pro-environmental behaviors feel a greater connection to nature because they do those things? And so longitudinal work or looking at randomized interventions, those sorts of studies would be useful to really get at the mechanisms behind those relationships.
Oh, yeah, that's a really interesting point. I was like, okay, I don't do research, and now this is making sense to me. Yeah, it sounds like a lot more work needs to be done. But I think you mentioned earlier about the things that could hinder us, right? We already covered this. A lot of things that are happening in our lives, where we work, where we live, how our lives are going about, that all of that will affect how close you are to nature. And a lot of the times is not because of your intention. It's not that you're intentionally avoiding nature, but it happens, right? And another factor is, I know this from working with a big team of remote workers, and I can tell you straight away that because a lot of people are remote workers, they work from home all the time, maybe 95% of the time. Like the other 5%, they would probably pick up their computer and go to a cafe if they're like, I need a change of environment. But like there's not a lot of time spent going out anymore, not even in the city context, but definitely not in nature. So all of this is made possible thanks to technology. Like we can work remotely. We don't have to go out anymore thanks to technology. We don't even have to go out and buy our food or buy our groceries because someone will deliver that for us. It's kind of like this, this new life, this kind of modern world we're living in. It's very interesting in the sense that when I think about it before this conversation, I was kind of like, there's really no reason for me to be in nature, unless I choose to be, because I can just choose to be inside. I don't have to go anywhere. And, like if I go from home to the office, one step up the tram, and then, a step down, that's the office. I don't really, go to nature. I mean, there's a really beautiful harbor in front of our office building. So that's a different story. But for a lot of people, it's like that, right? They go to work, they drive to work, get to the office, and then go home again. And they don't really, go out in nature. It happens. So this is something that it's kind of prevalent because technology is everywhere nowadays. And, most of the time, even on your time off, you probably just be with technology again, playing games, watching Netflix, doing a lot of activity. So how can this make things better? We have technology. It might actually hinder us from being out in nature. So what are some ways that technology can actually help us to be connected to nature?
Sure. Yeah. So, I mean, some people would say it's like a non-starter. You should just go visit nature and leave your cell phone at home. But I don't think that's very pragmatic. Technology is definitely integrated into our daily lives. And I think there are ways that it can be used. And a couple of examples. There's apps that can help you engage with nature when you're out. So there's one called Picture This, which helps you identify plants, right? So I don't actually know much about plants. I like hiking, but I don't really know what I'm looking at. So I could take a picture of a flower, and then it'll tell me what kind of flower that is, where it grows, and you can learn about it. So it's really, letting you engage with the elements that are in your environment. I think there's been a couple of other apps that have been developed by researchers that ping people to pay attention to their surroundings. They'll send them a message and say, hey, what beautiful nature have you noticed today? And just get people to sort of step outside themselves and really think about their surroundings. There's another app that's being developed, not necessarily for general public use right now, but they're doing trials on it where it uses your location and it'll remind you that, hey, you're close by a park. Do you have time to go for a walk and to go visit it, right, when somebody's out and about? So just encouraging them to make that effort using their cell phone as a way to know that this is a good park to recommend. And I think another way, a third way, is that social media can actually encourage people to go out and spend time in nature, particularly groups, people that may have been historically excluded, can use it as a way to find other people that are engaging in nature. Two that I'll mention here in the United States. One is called Outdoor Afro, which helps African Americans find groups of people who are going out to engage in nature. They do bird watching, or they go on hikes or walks. And that can be a way to, get somebody to take steps to engage because they have a group of people to go with. There's also a group called Hike It Baby that my sister was a part of. And it gets moms or parents to go out with their kids and to take their kids on hikes and ways that, before she was in that group, she just sat at home with a newborn and didn't really know what to do. And then, had a group that she could go out with. And I know they're doing good work to encourage that. So I think that those are the ways in which, we can use technology to still to benefit us and to encourage people to get out and engage in nature in a lot of different ways.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, those are such great ones. I didn't know that those apps existed until you told me. So I'm going to try them for sure. Hopefully I'll go on a hike this weekend and use the app and find out what plants and trees I'm looking at. Because I'm also not great at that. I go to the botanic gardens. I'll be like, oh, that's really nice. I don't know what that is. And then sometimes they would have little signs, everywhere to kind of tell you what they are. And then I'll just be like, okay, cool. And then I forget about it. So yeah, this is actually really great, to learn more about our planet, right? Such a nice way to ease into getting more connected to nature. Okay, so we've talked about a lot of the theory, lots of research, and also you recommended some apps, but I wonder for everybody else who is kind of new to, just getting back into getting their connection with nature. Like for me, I would say I'm also kind of like halfway there. I would like to be more connected with nature. And sometimes I forget because my days are really hectic. And sometimes I can confess that after work, I just go to bed. Like that's it. I don't even make an effort. Most of the time I'm really grateful because I'm in this beautiful city of Melbourne and I just go out for a really long walk after work. And that makes me really happy and I feel more connected to nature. But more often than not, I have to confess, I don't do that. So what would be a practice that you recommend to everyone, to anyone and everyone, so that we can start to improve our connectedness to nature?
Yeah. I think you're on the right track with just trying to build in short walks in our daily life, depending on where we are. Hopefully you're in a neighborhood that you can walk around in. Most neighborhoods have some natural elements in them, maybe not a lot, but one thing that I and my partner did during the pandemic was, nothing else was open, but we could leave our apartment and go on walks, and we would just pick different blocks, and then I'd be like, oh, this block has a lot of pine trees, this block has a lot of oak trees, just sort of paying attention to the different elements and trying to build connection that way, even when we couldn't really go out to, grand nature or anything like that. And we were living in Chicago at the time. So just trying to pay attention to what you do have. And like I said, it's not, you don't have to go spend hours in nature. Obviously, if you have that time and you like doing that, I certainly encourage it. It's not going to hurt you. But not everybody does. And so just trying to make those moments matter, I think is the right way to start. And then maybe the more you do it, the more you'll like doing it. And if you start remembering like, oh yeah, I felt really good after that walk, I should do that again. That can help you build a practice, build a habit, the way that all habits are built.
Yeah. Okay, so let's say someone is trying to get more connected to nature and they try this practice on the daily. What would be the minimum amount of time that they should spend doing this, in your opinion?
Oh, I don't really like to recommend minimums. I think that anything that you can do is good. You hear about, some people want to do things perfectly, right? Like they're perfectionists. Like they're only going to do something if they can do it exactly right. But I think approaching this more of a like good enough, right? Like getting out there is good. So doing whatever you can is a better way to think about it. And now I don't always go on like a dedicated nature walk, but I happen to my commute is I have walks on both ends of a bus ride, and so I try to pay attention to nature, even while I'm waiting at the bus stop or when I'm walking through my neighborhood to the bus. So do I get as much benefit from that as like when I on a Saturday go out for a longer walk in the park? No, but it's a start and it's something. So I guess I just encourage people to anything at all is better than nothing. You can even start with indoor plants, adding some live plants to your house or apartment. Things like that can also be, there's lots of benefits of indoor plants. And I don't do research in that area, but certainly people have. So even adding something like that to your environment can help you feel better and feel more connected to the natural world.
Yeah, absolutely. That's a really good one. I had a lot of plants a long while ago, and then I had to get rid of all of them because they're all toxic to my cats. When I started getting cats, I had to get rid of all of them. And then I started to do research like which plants are okay for cats, and then started back up again. So now I have one plant. Yep. Yes. Now it's a whole new journey. But then I can tell you that, and this might help our listeners. The other day, I saw 2 new leaves from my monstera, and I was like, "Oh, I feel so happy." They're just like new leaves. And I mean, monstera is not exactly non-toxic to cats, but I just love them so much. So like, I just have to get another one. I gave the other plants away earlier, and then now I just miss them so much. They're my babies. But yeah, I think it's actually really good to try adding that to your living environment. I think I heard a lot of people who kind of like, oh, I don't think I can take care of plants. But then that's not the point. The point is that you're adding that element to your living environment and do your best. Yep. If it's a first time for everything. So yeah, I think getting started is definitely a really good practice. Just to kind of get it done, and then you'll see the benefit.
Yeah, absolutely. And there's definitely plants. Like we got some plants for our lab, for our office. We figured we're doing research in this area. We should, practice our research. And we definitely looked up like what are the easiest plants to have to take care of. So you can. And now, of course, I don't remember the scientific names of any of them. One was like a snake leaf or snake something. They're very hardy, and it would be very difficult to damage them. So if you can Google hardy office plants, if you don't feel like you have a green thumb, that's definitely a good place to start.
I think what you just talked about is a snake plant. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah. Oh, cute. Yeah. I know these ones.
They're very attractive.
Yeah. I don't know. I think these are not toxic to cats. I'm just thinking out loud. But yeah, that's a really good one. Yeah. Really good. All right. So you said you don't like to recommend the minimums. We can try adding plants and we can try to be out as much as possible. I mean, what I take from that to our audience is if anyone's kind of like, oh, I don't know if this is going to be possible. Well, let's just try to get out of the house at least once a day and notice the environment and then come back, no matter how long or short that walk is. So I think that'd be a good place to start because I forget about this sometimes. Like there are days that I'm just kind of like, because I work from home at least 3 days a week. So I'm kind of like, oh, there's no reason for me to go out today. It's gloomy. It's rainy. I'm just going to stay in. Right.
No,
and then
I have to just try and go outside.
Yeah, but then I feel funky afterwards. I'm like, you know what? I should have gone out, even though it was rainy. Like even just a short walk around the block, that'd be great. So yeah, it's definitely something to try for anyone and everyone. All right, so I think that would be everything that we needed to cover for the practice section. Very practical, and hopefully we're encouraging more people to go out at least once a day, just to explore their living environment beyond their building, their house, and so on. And we have a lot of questions from our audience, and a lot of them are kind of related to the topics that we were talking about earlier. One thing that we haven't addressed, and I think this is an interesting one, is what are some of the potential negative consequences of being disconnected from nature, and how can we address these issues?
Yeah. So, well, we've talked about a lot of the benefits of feeling that nature connection, and the downsides are the absence of those. There's also work showing that people who so like my lab has my old lab has done some work showing that there are cognitive benefits to being in nature. People have better working memory and better attention. And some work suggests that people who are more connected to nature might reap those benefits more easily because they feel more comfortable in a space or they have a habit of being in nature. So it's not as challenging. And so building a connection to nature can then help us feel the other benefits of being in nature. There's a lot of affective benefits too. We feel happier, we feel more positive if we've gone on a nature walk. But if you're nervous about being there, if you don't go to the forest that often, you're not actually going to reap those benefits. So feeling disconnected can then actually make it harder to get the benefits that nature does provide. So, starting with baby steps, like we've talked about, can sort of build this practice. And then the more you do it, the better, and the better for you, I think it will be.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I think that's a really good reminder because I think we didn't mention this before, but cognitive functions, that's super important. And I think if we spend a lot of our time just indoor looking at our screens, I don't know about others, but personally, I have a headache. Sometimes 2 hours in the morning.
Sure.
That's how quick it gets to me. So I think I couldn't think either. Like I feel like my brain's foggy and I just need to disconnect from everything to find that connection again. And so I think, it's super important to have this in your daily practice and just go out. I feel like my walk from home to the gym in the morning helps just with that. Mm-hmm. I'm like, oh, okay, I'm out, fresh air, I see people, I see trees. That already helps. And I feel like I work better as well, have more mental clarity if I do that. So that's a really good point. Thank you. And finally, before we let you go, we have this section called Open Mic, where you're welcome to talk about anything that you're passionate about. I know you're super passionate about your research and your work. So I wouldn't be surprised if you would talk more about it. So take it away. What would you like to share with us today?
Yeah, absolutely. So, we've been talking a lot about how engaging with nature can help us feel more connected to the natural world. But other parts of my research have shown that it also makes us feel more connected to others. So we can help build our social relationships by going out into nature. And so we did one study where we took people to a conservatory, an indoor sort of botanic garden. And we took them to an indoor mall, and we compared what they were thinking about in these two locations. And we found that people were much more likely to be thinking just about themselves when they were in the mall. Whereas when they were in the conservatory, they're more likely to be thinking about other people and the world around them. And so we also found that when you're visiting parks, you feel more connected to the other people in your environment. And so it's not just a way to build our connection to the natural world, but it's also a way to build our connection to others. I'm working on another study right now where we're looking at loneliness and whether people feel less lonely, even when they're by themselves, when they're visiting a park. And so I think that's just something to keep in mind, that there's a lot of different ways in which engaging with nature can improve your well-being, because feeling more connected to others is definitely a key piece for well-being as well.
Yeah, that's really cool. And I think that's a really good point that we didn't talk about earlier, because one of the things that I notice when it comes to being in nature is sometimes you get a little bit of a boost if you're going out with your friend and just kind of like, oh, hey, do you want to go out for this walk, or do you want to go camping, or do you want to go to this park? And then you would feel not only more connected to nature, but actually build that relationship in a better way because I don't remember where I read this, but it's basically like, a lot of our activities nowadays are indoors, and, a lot of the times you would spend time watching TVs together where you can actually do other activities outdoors where it will improve your connection to other people and even yourself. I'm keen to hear more about your studies because, like I spend a lot of time by myself in nature. I don't know if that actually is scientifically great, but I do know that it's good for me. I know that it's really good for me. So I'm keen to hear. Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, a lot of research that's been done is we send one person on a walk by themselves. So, a lot of the benefits that we're seeing have been at least studied scientifically that way. But I think it's interesting to think about, like in the real world, a lot of people, I mean, I spend time in nature by myself. I go for hikes alone. But I also go, with my partner or with my family. And so I'm planning a study coming up where we're looking at partners going into nature together and how they talk to each other and how they feel connected to their partner. And how the environment, may relate to sort of inducing feelings of closeness and increasing relationship satisfaction and things like that. So that'll be some future work.
Yeah, that sounds promising. I'm very excited to find out more about that because we here at LMSL loves those insights. Anything that's kind of like, oh, that's a new finding. Very interesting. How can we make that happen in our daily lives? I think from today's conversation, I'm already like planning for my long weekend being out in nature. So, like I can tell you that it's working. You're definitely doing a great job at convincing me. And I also think it's very important to kind of get that connection with ourselves when we're out in nature, because I do remember that a lot of the times when things are kind of like wonky, I didn't really feel okay, and I would go out in nature and I would feel like I calmed down again. And this is like a reminder, because a lot of other times I forget to do that.
Sure.
Even though I know that it used to be helpful, I don't do that. And so now it's kind of like, hey, this is your reminder. And maybe for our audience, if anyone is kind of feeling the same, or they're feeling a bit funky, or they want to work on their well-being, and they truly want to maybe even be more creative. I think I've heard being in nature can help you to be more creative as well. Yep. And this is, like a message from the universe to go out and connect with nature and see what happens.
Absolutely.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for joining us today. I know it's I think afternoon for you already. So, approaching the end of the day. Yes. Hopefully you're feeling okay. And you're going to go in, I'm hoping you're going to go out in nature after this
yes,
to
absolutely.
enjoy your environment. But before I let you go, how can our listeners find out about your work if they're interested? Like what's your website, maybe social media that they can visit? Yeah.
I am on Twitter as Kate_Schertz, SCHERTZ. And I'm also on the lab website of the lab that I'm at the University of Michigan. So it's the Emotion and Self-Control Lab, working with Dr. Ethan Cross. And so you can definitely find me there, and my email is listed, and happy to field any questions or share my research papers if anyone is interested in learning more.
Yeah, definitely. I'll sign up for that research paper. I'm interested. You listed a bunch of research projects. I'm kind of like, I want to sign up to hear more about that. I'll go and find that. Thank you so much for being here, Kate. And we were excited to have you, and we weren't wrong. It's been a really good conversation, getting to know more about this relationship that we should have, our connection with nature. And for me personally, it's been a really good reminder to, do my part and do better at, getting that connection. And thank you for being here.
Hopefully
we'll have you
so
back
much.
sometime.
I had a great time.
Yeah, we'll definitely sign up to see more of your research.
Okay, thank you.
You've been listening to Doing Well, the Wellbeing Science Insights Podcast, produced by the Wellbeing Science Labs, a division of LMSL, the Life Management Science Labs. More episodes are available from 10 life management perspectives and can be found by searching LMSL on Apple Podcast, Google Podcast, Spotify, YouTube, and other podcasting apps available on your devices. If you enjoyed this episode, Please rate, share, and subscribe to our channel so that other people can find it and we can continue to provide quality content. More of our work can be found on our website at we.lmsl.net, where you can join our movement. I'm Lu Ngo. Thanks for tuning in.